All right. Thank you everyone for joining us today. As I said previously, we are keeping everyone muted to limit background noise. If you have questions, please utilize the chat feature. You can send your questions directly to me, Adam Timmerman, and that's who I am, Adam Timmerman with the KC Chamber. We're happy you can take time out of your afternoon to join us on another PPP webinar. There's been a lot of changes with the program lately, so that's why we wanted to connect you again with Rebecca Goebbels, I said that right, Rebecca, right?
Yes.
Rebecca, who has done a webinar previously with us about PPP, so we're happy to have her back. She is a business and program development specialist at the Missouri Small Business Development Center at UMKC, where she teaches entrepreneurial coursework, consults with business owners, and manages special projects. Rebecca has experience as both a banker and a business owner. Her finance background includes managing a small business administration microloan program, a decade of commercial lending, and development of financial products for the small business market. Her entrepreneurial, I cannot say that word today.
You can say business.
Yeah, her business experience runs the gamut of packaging loans for pizza and beer money in college, to building a greeting card company, to now consulting with small business owners. Her skills include financial analyst, business operations, process improvement, business coaching, and classroom facilitation. And like I said, she did a PPP webinar for us earlier this year, so we're happy to have her back. Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you at this point, and we'll go from here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it greatly. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen such that you all can be looking at some of the information that I am seeing. Thank you again to the Greater Kansas City Chamber for having me here. I work for the Missouri Small Business Development Center Network, which is a nationwide network that also exists here in Missouri to help people start and grow businesses. And we do that in kind of three primary ways, some of which you can see here on our website. First of which is group learning. We do a ton of group learning through our training arm called Elevation Lab. And that's what we're going to work on a little bit today, is learning about PPP. We also do one-on-one private business coaching, and that service is at no cost. That's your tax dollars at work. That's another big bucket of things we do here at the Small Business Development Center. Adam, like you mentioned previously, I was a banker for how many years? And it's long enough now that I no longer reveal the number. But so as a result, I've been tapped for a lot of helping everybody just try and figure out what all is happening with this disaster financing onwards and so forth. I've been with the organization, I think I'm going on 9 years now. But PPP and idle loans and all of those words, that's new to all of us. And so it occurs to me that I may have assumed some facts not in evidence for what might be most beneficial to talk through today. Because right now, the PPP, which is Paycheck Protection Program loans, which are the disaster loans through the bank, everybody's trying to figure out how to get those loans forgiven, right? That's the big hot topic, but I'm not sure. I may go ahead and pull up an additional link that I have not pre-sent to you, Adam, as I realize there may be some people on the call that might be consternated by the verbiage and different types of loans. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to pull up a link that is not actually not one I previously sent to you, but we're going to talk through first, now that I think about it, the different types of disaster loans and give some imagery with that, so that as we talk about one particular type quite deeply, that'll be easier for everybody to have as a frame of reference. So once I get this up here, I am copying this really quickly to put into the chat so that anyone who is interested can access this same document. This is a living document put together and managed by the nationwide network, America's SBDC, that we all belong to. So I wanted to, primarily today, we are going to be talking about PPP loans, which again is Paycheck Protection Program loans that are an offshoot of the standard Small Business Administration 7A program, put into place as a part of COVID disaster recovery. As we talk through PPP in greater detail, you will also hear me talking about EIDL or EIDL loans. EIDL stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. These loans are ones that you would have applied directly from the Small Business Administration for. They have different terms, all kinds of things, including a small upfront, potentially forgivable grant function. So different terms, all kinds of things with these. High level, the differences are EIDL. You applied directly to SBA on their website, and I say applied because these funds are played out. The only people who are still allowed to apply for EIDL loans are farmers. And so if you are not a farmer, EIDL is no longer available to you, which is not ideal, but some of you have applied for both. And as how PPP will work and be forgiven relates, I wanted to make sure so it was through the SBA, it was different terms. And if you could have gotten up to 10,000, 1,000 per employee in an advance that was purported to be entirely forgivable. No way you would ever have to pay that back in any instance if you'd gotten the EIDL advance. Yikes. We're going to talk about how that doesn't turn out to be entirely the case. Which, I give the Small Business Administration deep amounts of appreciation and credit, because they were building, they weren't just jumping off a cliff and building a parachute on the way down because of the scale of this disaster. The entire country fell off a cliff at the same time, and they had to build a parachute big enough to catch us all. And so while there are some frustrations and questions that we might have about this, I am deeply grateful for any government agency that has responded at all, let alone as quickly as they have in comparison to the usual, I think glacial is the word I'll choose, glacial pace of most government decisions. So while not what we may have in mind, especially as entrepreneurs who are used to moving fast, for government terms, this is the fastest thing I've ever seen. It's like I have my eyebrows blown off. It's been comparatively fast. So doesn't mean I don't see the issues that we'll talk about, but I remain grateful and thankful. All right, so that's EIDL. PPP loan, Paycheck Protection Program. These are loans of effectively, and we'll go through these just a little bit. I'm gonna go here and then scroll down. PPP loans remain open. If you do not already have one of these, there are still PPP funds available at various financial institutions, and you may make an application for a PPP loan until June 30th, as presently written. Okay, so these loans, if you receive them, they are a 2-year loan, and the interest rate is 1%. So it's all but free money. It's 1% money, but you have to turn around and pay it back within 2 years. The feature that everybody is interested in is, how do I get these loans forgiven, right? Because if they adhere to certain qualities, which we're learning are not originally as advertised, then these loans can be forgiven and you only have to pay a portion of them back. The way your loan amount is calculated, it's basically 2.5 times your average payroll. So it's your average monthly payroll times 2.5. Ballpark is how your loan amount will be figured for that. You can talk about here in this box, talks a little bit about forgiveness. And so basically you're supposed to use it for payroll. And if you can't use it all for payroll, you can do mortgage payments, rent, mortgage interest, rent payments, and utilities. We're like, well, what's a utility? We'll talk about that, right? Because if you ask me, internet's a utility, but maybe it isn't for some people. So we'll talk about what that is as we continue our conversation today. No loan fees, none of that business. You can pay it back early. You need to use it for what it's for. It's called the Paycheck Protection Program. So you need to use it to pay people. Hopefully that one's overt. So if you have an idle loan too, you can't use the money for the same thing. See where it says prohibitions here? Borrower cannot have pending application for an idle loan for the same purpose, right? So you could get a PPP loan for payroll, and you could have an idle loan for operational issues or that kind of thing. So I don't want you to think that you can't have both. You absolutely can. But you can't just be like, I want you to pay for my payroll and you to pay for my payroll and you to pay for my payroll. It's not Oprah, right? So we gotta just one at a time on that. And then there's a bunch of notes here for this conversation. Many of us have these already and are trying to figure out now what to do to figure out payment. So as a result, I'm going to step away from discussing these loans on the front end at this point. I would like to check in with Adam and see if there are questions that are being asked in the chat before I move on. That seems like it would be appropriate to cover here.
Yeah, I just had one come in. This person applied for both EIDL and PPP. They first received the EIDL emergency grant and then PPP. Do they have to spend the EIDL emergency grant and the PPP within 8 weeks?
No.
Payroll or rent location, or do they just need to spend their PPP money within 8 weeks?
You have to spend your PPP money on the timeline that we're going to talk about today, on not only that timeline, but for those purposes that we're going to talk about today. EIDL has comparatively no restrictions other than business operating purposes, including all other things not named here. So EIDL is pretty broad, but can you be like, you know what this business needs is a vacation to Barbados for the owner. Don't do that. But I mean, as long as you're not, first of all, who's getting on an airplane? I have a lot of questions. But as long as you're not doing anything fishy, you're fine on your EIDL spending, as long as it is true business purpose. All right.
We should be able to continue then.
Excellent. Thanks. I appreciate you helping manage questions for me, my friend.
Not a problem. We're pros at this.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting good at this point. All right. So then from there, I'm going to come and talk a little bit about tax changes. Again, Adam has these links and we'll put them in the chat. Some of these are paywall protected, which, you know, I know not everybody may be a subscriber. Here's a plug for getting this information at no cost from your local public library, Kansas City, Missouri Public Library. All you need is a library card and you can get every single article in the Business Journal ever for free. All you need is your Kansas City, Missouri or Mid-Continent Public Library or Johnson County Public Library card.
That may be the most valuable information you share today, Rebecca.
Real life. And so there's also way more. And so maybe we should talk about how to get the librarians hooked up with the chamber so we can let all your constituents know the insane amount of stuff that is available for businesses for free at the library, but we will move on. Although, as you can tell, it is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So at a minimum, just don't let the paywall stop you. So this happened ballpark 2 weeks ago. Let's see what the date on this article was. Actually, the article may not have been written on the date, but ballpark 2 weeks ago, the IRS changed the tax rules for the PPP program. So from the jump, it has been communicated that these loans will not be considered income, and therefore the loan will not be taxable. Well, because what the idea is, you get this money and then you get it forgiven, and so maybe that's income to you. And they have been very consistent saying that no matter what, these loans are not taxable. And then they turned around and made them de facto taxable. So technically that's still true, but it got squirrely. So I want to let you know down here that general gist is that proceeds are not taxable. However, here it goes. Looks like April 30th was the date of this thing. Yeah, about 2 weeks ago. The IRS is no longer letting you deduct expenses paid for by the PPP loan that are part of your forgiveness. And so the idea was you get this loan, you have these expenses, and the loan gets forgiven, and then you do your taxes like normal, was everybody's original assumption. No, what they're saying is if you get this money and use it and then you get the money forgiven, then you can't then claim that payroll. You can't then claim those months of, what do you call it? Rent. You can't then claim that interest expense onwards and so forth. So here's the money, but you can't claim the expenses. It's de facto taxable because it's taken away the deductions rather than taxing the income on the front. So it's a backdoor version of this is taxable now. So heads up. I imagine that may generate some questions. Based on the few of your faces that show on my screen, I'm getting frowns. So are there questions to go with the frowning? Going once?
Haven't had any submitted yet.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
All right. So.
Oh, wait, we got one. How does that impact a nonprofit then?
Okay, so let me think this through. Okay, so nonprofit structure is actually remarkably similar to for-profit structure. It just changes what you're allowed to do with what would have been profitable and cash flow, right? And so you will have less otherwise profit cash flow that has to be pumped back into your nonprofit. Will be the end benefit result of that. So these are things, guys, that you are absolutely going to want to speak to your tax professionals about, because for some of us, if your payroll is the #1 expense for most companies, and especially service companies. And so you're like, well, wait, my income like died in February, and I don't think it's maybe going to come back until, you know, I don't know, June, July, August. I have no idea. No one does. And I can't deduct those expenses. So then more of what I do make, if any, is taxable. And at the same time, I have fewer, if I do take a loss for the year, I can't necessarily carry it forwards as far as I might have been able to, depending on my ownership structure. So there's a lot of stuff here, depending on how you're legally organized as an entity, what your actual structures are, what the amount turns out to be. But please don't wait. This is not a question you have to tackle right now. The #1 thing that everyone watching this needs to keep in mind is please use this money to survive. The number of people who are like, well, I got this money and now I have to give it all forgiven, and if, you know, it has to be forgiven, it has to be forgiven, it has to be forgiven. Don't get me wrong, that's important. Like, let's not just, if there's free money on the table, let's take it, right? But let's not let the forgiveness tail wag the dog. The #1 thing you are in charge of is making sure that your company survives. That's the #1 thing to do with these funds. And then let's worry about how these funds can become free to you. But survival is #1. So along those lines, this is important. Do not wait until the end of 2020 to have this conversation, but you could wait until the summer to talk to a CPA about some of this. Because honestly, the thing we all need to be doing now is figuring out how to make money again. All right, that's #1.
Do you know anything, is there a bill in Congress right now that would address this? You know?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So the Democrat-controlled House passed a bill called the HEROES Act last week and a half ago, ish, right? We're just gonna spot me COVID time, and I don't know what day it is. Okay. So
Yeah, I feel yeah. I think today's Monday to me. So
yeah, I'm completely confused by these things, but it's a week ago ish. And it was called the Heroes Act. And honestly, it was a good political play because it had a lot of neat things in it. And they were all looking for something new to present about disaster on the news. And so it got a huge splash. And it is DOA in the Senate. There's no way based on current political will, right?
yeah.
So then, because one point of view ratcheted up the press and pressure, and then I am told there is some Senate-based bill that covers a different wish list that is not analogous, that is being bandied about in the Senate right now. Different point of view, different goals, this kind of thing. And I don't even know if they're going to be similar enough that they would be able to go to conference committee. The way conference committee works is when the two sides get something close, then they have a select group of people from both houses who square up the bills, so that then they can go back and vote is kind of the process. I don't know if they're even going to be close enough to get to a conference committee. And I don't know Lucy Ward, but I agree with every one of her facial expressions.
So we've gotten like maybe two more technical questions regarding this topic. One being that can the forgiven portion as income be deducted, or can we claim the forgiven portion as income so we can deduct the salaries, and what is included in transportation in this forgivable portion as well? Should we just be more concerned of waiting for this all to get resolved at the congressional level before people even start completing applications for forgiveness? Or
well, here's the thing, there's no deadline for when this is supposed to start.
Okay.
So right now, I think you should just be paying attention to the guidance as it comes out, which in everyone's defense, this is coming out in little dribs and drabs of, I don't know, well, this is what they say today, and then the IRS changed their mind tomorrow, and da-da-da-da-da. And so, Daddy, I'm working on this right now. Okay. Excuse me. Just everybody keep paying attention. As we know more, we will tell you more. And that's the best any of us can do, right? And so just give yourself permission to be that level of informed, right? Be like, because think about it. Otherwise, you're asking yourself to see the future. And if you can't see the future in normal times, why in the heck would you be expected to know the future in the middle of an international pandemic? So just, give yourself a break. That's my advice. So to the end, towards the idea of so many technical questions, we will mention this throughout, but at the end of today's webinar, we will give information on how to get a hold of the rest of my team. Guys, I'm just one person on an amazing team of 10. And so I imagine there will be a lot of questions, a lot of people seeking help with us. We will, if we cannot get to your question as we progress today, we absolutely will be giving you the contact information for how to get hooked up with either myself or my 9 other amazing counterparts so that we can get whatever it is that you need moving forwards. And, heads up, we're pretty rad and we've been here the whole time, but now that a disaster has struck, everybody's aware, but so we can help you in disaster time, and then we can just keep helping you because that's our job. So for now, let's move on a little more deeply. Does that into some of the things I had been planning to cover, and then see if we can swing back for questions? Does that work, Adam?
Yep, I think that's a great idea.
Awesome. All right, so heads up, tax things, talk to a CPA, but it's not number one thing to do right now. Number one thing to do is survive, then figure out forgiveness. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Just a reminder from a different article, again, that Adam has and can put in the chat for you. The reason this tax thing is the IRS is viewing it as double dipping to forgive the money and let you expense it, which again was a bit of a bait and switch if you ask me, but there's why this tax thing is what it is. I'm gonna take a drink and then we're gonna move on. All right, so next, let's talk about something that people have been bandying about as an idea, because as written, guys, this is a little structurally rough in implementation. I know why politically it sounded good and that everyone's heart and head was in the right place, but in practice, some of this has become difficult. The way the PPP loans work is that the time clock for when you have to start bringing people back and offering them payroll and the clock starts the instant you are dispersed your money, you're like, what? Like all my people have been like at the house and they don't have childcare, and you're telling me they have to come back like the day I get the money for this to work? Yeah, and that's not how humans are. That's what is that Geico commercial? That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works, right? So, a question to solve, because you have to bring the people back, and you have to bring them back for 8 consecutive weeks. Presently as written, those 8 consecutive weeks have to happen June 30th backwards. So even if you get your PPP disbursement next week, there is mathematically no way for that to work. That is one that I feel confident Congress will fix, even if they have to tack it on to something else that's like, a clean air bill or something like that. They'll tack that one on because that's just not how time works. And I have faith in our elected officials that they can at least understand how time works. But I guess in 2 months we'll find out if I'm right. So you heard it here, folks. That's my prediction. All right. So you can bonus out employees, right? So let's say since the clock starts for your 8 weeks, the moment you get dispersed, and let's say you can't actually get everybody back and operating again until you've had, I don't know, like a week to get somebody to come in and disinfect your place of business, and another week for everybody to round up childcare. And so then you only have 6 weeks, right? And you're like, oh, what do I do? Well, you can pay bonuses to employees. You cannot pay bonuses to owners, right? And I think that, again, that smells fair. Like the person who is physically taking the food to the car deserves a bonus right now because they're at highest risk. And so can I bonus people out to get to what would have been the same spend? Yes, as long as those people don't own it. Turns out to be the answer to that. And again, Adam will put this information in the chat so you can read more about this. And again, you're like, oh, that could be me. I need a plan here. Talk to your CPA, and also reach out to us at the Small Business Development Center. And you can have more of this scintillating conversation only one-on-one. Scintillating, there's a word I would have told you I wouldn't have used today, talking about banking.
Right. Do you mind if we pause for a few questions I've had come into the chat? Rebecca, is that okay? Are you there?
Sorry, I'm giving you the thumbs up. I was drinking.
Oh, sorry, I
am drinking soda. I just want to make sure for those of you who are not looking at the video, I am clearly drinking soda. I'm not actually like drinking.
Well, I have it set up so I'm only looking at myself because I love myself that much.
Okay.
So the first question I have, if a sole proprietor receives the funds allowed by the PPP program for their own company or their own compensation, my apologies, 8-week pro-rata, I don't know. And the same person takes the advantage of the liberalization of unemployment insurance to cover independent contractors and sole proprietors, and later receives unemployment benefits for the same period. What happens?
I gotta tell you, I don't know. Because sole proprietors were not, so sole proprietors and independent contractors can get PPP loans, and they were encouraged to early on solve their lack of income by going through the unemployment system. So that was the route that was suggested to everybody. Then, every state and federal computer system related to this was like a snake trying to eat a grapefruit as far as, volume that they're dealing with. And as a result, they didn't work real great. And so what was envisioned for timing has not been the timing that anyone received. in actuality. So I believe that there is before your PPP comes in, my recollection, which we are going to put as a grain of salt, is that you can keep that money for unemployment until your PPP comes in, but then I think you're supposed to shut it off. But that's one that I can take a look at and get a real answer to versus a educated guess, and circle back. And so whoever that person is, please reach out to SBDC at UMKC.edu and say, Rebecca, I have this question, and we'll deal with it outside of here for something deeper.
And everyone on the call will send out a recording of this webinar. We'll send out the hyperlinks, and we'll include that SBDC UMKC email as well. So you have it all afterwards, so you're not scrambling to pull it from the chat or anything. A second question, this person is a nonprofit. They have 3 full-time and 3 part-time. 1 full-time person resigns. 1 part-time person goes into maternity leave. What do they do?
Okay. Lot in that one. Okay, so general gist. First of all, nonprofits are allowed to participate in these, which is unheard of in the history of the Small Business Administration, right? Because they don't pay federal taxes and yet they're getting federal support. So that's awesome. And so then on the issue of somebody resigned, if they resign, you have to have documentation of the resignation and you have to prove your best effort to employ somebody else, right? Because if you got money for payroll for a human to do those functions, you have to do your dead level best to get a new human to do those functions. And we can talk about what that means, but it absolutely needs to have a written component. Then there is a maternity leave component to this question as well. You'll see because we are going to go through, there is now an 11-page, super exciting document. I got to tell you, I do this for a living, and this document was like, even for me, and I'm used to these. There is some information about cash versus non-cash compensation in here, and we will talk, because this form is dense. Dense is the word I'll choose. But I believe that maternity leave is considered part of non-cash compensation and potentially forgivable based on this iteration of the form that came out last Friday, and everybody is still testing it, and I hear there's going to be changes to this even. So at this moment, with what limited information I have, that should count.
Okay, and then we're going to do a couple quick ones here. Can you bonus employees who are making over $100,000?
Sure, but you can't have it forgiven.
Okay, and then have you seen any guidance on transportation, fuel, or bus
Oh
service?
yeah, I forgot that question from before. Transportation is not a piece of this.
Okay.
For forgiveness.
Okay, and then the mortgage interest and lease/rent payments refer to real and personal property. Does personal refer to equipment as well?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But that's a question I get a lot, but I don't believe so. I think it was intended to be protection, right? When you think structurally, when you're writing a law, who are they trying to protect? And I believe this is intended to be protection for landlords to avoid a real estate-based economic second wave of doom. As a result, I believe that this is real estate specific, but that's another one I can try and get an answer to.
And then, okay, sounds good. And then the last one for this cycle, will there be a conversion for bi-monthly versus bi-weekly payroll cycles?
Yes, and that is in here, in what we're going to look at here shortly. So yeah, it's not the flexibility that everybody'd hoped for, but it's more than none, and that's where we were. So let's celebrate where we got instead of lament where we aren't yet.
Sounds good. All right, do you want to keep going? And I have a couple more come in, but I can ask them later.
Oh, sure. Okay, so then let's see what I thought I was going to tell you yet. Oh, I was going to now show you this 11-page document, which was the beginning of helping to figure this out. It is available from the SBA's website. Adam will put it in the chat for you, as well as a follow-up document to today's conversation. And you can see here on the right that there's a download PDF. And if you see down here, there's 2 versions, and one is fillable. And so if you're like me, I want to print one so that I can make my little notes, and then I want a fillable one where I can type it. So both of those are available here. And then we're going to move on to show you what happens when you download it. All right, you are hopefully seeing what says Paycheck Protection Program Loan Forgiveness Application. I'm in hopes that the size of this font is already telling you what joy this is about to be, right? So when you look at this, it starts, actually, before we go into the document itself, I want to talk about what's the best way for others to ingest this information. Outside of our conversation today, what I'd like you to do is print one of these, or I guess you can read it on a screen if you're one of those people with that skill, but that's not me. So I print one of these and read the whole thing from top to bottom. And I didn't stop to try and answer questions, right? Because there's a lot of little blanks and things. And I got lost trying to answer as I went. And so for everybody's probably best understanding of how this should work, read the whole thing, and the only thing I want you to write down are questions that you have, because I learned that a lot of them are eventually answered, but in a really weird place. So as far as just how to ingest this information, just read it from soup to nuts and write your questions. Do not answer their questions, and then see how many still remain by the time you get to the end. Then when it comes time to filling out these forms, I want you to start at the back and work forwards. As I've started to work with this, that's just a much better way to execute this in ways that are digestible, because the things at the end end up informing the things in the front. But that's not how, I'm not in charge of writing government forms. So just let that be my tip to you on ingestion alone. Okay, so now what's in here is effectively, oh, I guess realize I'm looking at the one in my hands and not showing you the one on the screen. So it's asking now for loan numbers, disbursement dates. Ooh, look at this, idle advance amount. Do you see this here? And actually, I think I might be able to make this a little bigger for, that's probably nicer for everyone. All right, so here, idle advance amount. So you heard me talking before about you could get this $1,000 per employee idle loan advance, and first it was $10,000 free money no matter what you do, and then it was $1,000 per employee advance up to $10,000. You don't have to pay it back whatever you do, and now it's $1,000 per employee, and if you get it, it's not deducted. You have to tell people in your PPP loan, and it is not forgivable. So it became a loan. See what happened there? It was a grant, then it's an advance, and now it's a loan if you got both of them. Which, you know what? As opposed to closing, I'll take it. And so I just need to right size my expectations. But, you know, grr is appropriate response. So the idle loan, idle advance amount, if you get the advance, that is not forgivable. So if you got a $100,000 PPP loan and a $4,000 idle advance, the maximum forgiveness you can get is $96,000. See what's happening there? So it's going to talk to you here about time frames, periods, that kind of thing. I'm actually now going to go to the end and work backwards, showing you how I would do this rather than get, because we're about to get into some things that talk about subpart. See this 85 FR 20817? No, let's just go to the end and start doing something useful. Okay, nobody get dizzy while I scroll. All right, this thing I mentioned is 11 pages long. Still scrolling, still scrolling, still scrolling. Okay. And now for me to be able to see this, I do have to make it a little smaller though. Okay. This last part is also starting at the end gives you a quick win. You can choose to disclose your demographics to the SBA. You do, you don't, it's fine either way. But that's one that's at least easy to fill out, and it's a way to get a quick win with this form that is not super easy. So then fill it out, don't fill it out. Let's figure out what's next on this thing. Okay. So lots of verbiage, lots of verbiage, lots of verbiage. Okay. You're going to get asked some questions on a table that you have not seen yet that's going to ask about someone's FTE, which to me, I'd be like, why wouldn't you just ask me how many hours this person works? But okay, FTE. You are allowed to say 1 or 1/2. 1.25 FTE for one human who works 60 hours is not a thing. And if somebody works 0.2 of an FTE, you just count them as a half. So there has been some guidance that you're not being asked to do like weird fractions, thank God. But also for purposes of PPP loans, unlike the Affordable Care Act, right? So that's colloquially known as Obamacare. Full-time work was considered 30 hours for the Affordable Care Act. For PPP forgiveness, full-time is considered 40. And that is an important federal distinction that I want to make sure everybody is aware of. So let's see. So that's the definition of FTE. So I just saw that word there. This is where we get to some of that information about look back period. Okay, so there are 3 potential periods of time that you may want to measure this for, and then you will be forgiven for the lesser of the 3. Okay, and so your FTE on payroll between February 15th of last year and June 30th of last year, or January 1 through February 29 of this year, right? For some companies, especially younger companies, they might have started and not had employees or that kind of thing, and then they got some business and then grew to have employees. So that's a big reason why you would want to look at those. And again, it's the lesser of the 2. If you have seasonal payroll, it's this item C here, right? And so then there's a 12-week period in the summer that you could then use. And keep in mind, it's the lesser of the 3 is how that is supposed to work. Although here I was advised that it's the lesser of the 3, but looking at this, it does say on the piece of paper at the election of the borrower. But the way I've seen things described and then put into practice, why don't you do all 3 and be prepared to get the lesser of the 3, but until somebody says you can't pick the highest one, right? So that's what I would recommend that you do. Because remember, these conversations are happening with your banker, because PPP loans came from your bank and they have to adhere to these terms in order to get the guarantee in case, heaven forbid, you go belly up and short them, and then the depositor goes to make a withdrawal at the ATM and they're like, oh, there's no money, I made a loan to the wrong company, and so the feds are guaranteeing these. But if the banks don't do their paperwork right, the Fed will renege the guarantee. So keep in mind, you get to talk to a real human about this at your bank, but they're being tied to the federal rules and paperwork precision. But at least it's a human instead of a 1-800 number. So there's that. And so, yeah, if your banker lets it through, that's their problem. I mean, that is their discretion, and what an opportunity for you. Because I was a banker for a long time, so I tend to speak very directly, but that's the general gist. All right, so then let's go up and look. So what's going to happen here is you're going to be asked for a list of employees, right? And so their name, any employee identifier, cash compensation. Cash compensation is defined, as we now scroll up in this document, to include, let's just see. I highlighted this because I knew I'd want to talk about it, and now I can't find it. All right, cash compensation is defined as gross salary, gross wages, gross tips, gross commissions, paid leave, so any vacation, family medical leave, sick leave that is not included in the Families First Coronavirus Act, right? So then sick leave has been extended and has a bunch of new flexibility and rules. So any standard sick leave, that can count. It includes allowances for dismissal or separation. And so that's where maternity leave would probably fit in here, because it's typically handled in most companies as a modification of sick time. Because I mean, you're having a kid, you're not actually sick, but you know what I mean? Like, it's a natural, anyway, that's a different webinar. Let's move on. So then later in here, where did it talk about? So the employer portion of retirement and guys, I can't put my hands on it, but I swear both cash and non-cash compensation are included here. But only for this table is cash compensation being asked of you. Again, average FTE, so you count them as a whole FTE or a half. Those are the options that are available to you. And then there's a whole grid in here about reducing wages, and if so, how much, and da-da-da-da. We can talk more about that. They have to be in the United States. And this is asking you to separate these people out. Table 1, employees whose cash compensation is 100,000 or less. Table 2, any employees whose compensation is 100,000 or more. So each will be reviewed, but the form asks you to separate them out. So let's go up a little more. Let's see. If you had to reduce people's wages, there is a 3-step formula. See what I mean about this form being dense, and why I think you're going to want to maybe reach out to us so we can talk one-on-one. So there is this formula for how to figure out if you had to reduce somebody's wages more than 25%, is there still a way that you can get this forgiven? Maybe. And here's the formula. We're not going to have time to talk about it today, but there it is. Let's see, moving up. Here's one. So on that table number 1 that I just showed you, it was like, under no circumstances are you to put employees' compensation in here, was one of the lines. You're like, but you told me that I should include my salary when I applied for the loan, and I'm an owner and I swear I'm working hard. Where do I put it? Right here. Different table, compensation to owner, line 9. And so don't freak out, there is a spot for it. But when I first read this, I freaked out because I could not originally find the spot for it. So heads up, it is real. And you can see in here, right? So here is actually what we were talking about just a bit ago. A place to put in information about non-cash compensation, right? So your employee, your contribution towards their health insurance, their retirement plan, state and local taxes on their compensation, not federal. So they're not going to give you federal money to pay back federal taxes. They're not doing that, but state and local, especially, for those of us in KCMO, I mean, that's 1%, is, well, depending on who, as an employee, who pays it and blah, 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 but you know what I mean? So that's at least some information about non-cash. And as you can see, this is just, guys, this is dense. Here's where they're defining what an FTE is. Line 10, add these together. I'm not going to belabor this a ton, but general gist, it's a dense form. It will change again. This form will absolutely change again. And so this at least gives us some guidance and a way to start to gather the numbers and then make some decisions as what we know now. Like we learned that you can pay employees bonuses, but don't pay yourself bonus, right? That's good stuff. I want to talk about what I know to be some unanswered questions and then handle some of yours. Okay, so one of the things you may have seen is a lot of people took PPP money and it was bad PR. I'll let everyone judge for themselves whether or not it was shifty, but it was certainly bad PR. So then it's like, well, these loans are not going to be wildly scrutinized. If your PPP loan is $2 million or is under $2 million, there's just not enough staff to audit you. I mean, there's not. So you're probably okay. Now, you still have to not commit fraud, because you've seen some people probably in the news already go to jail for that. They're like made up employees and got a big loan, and those people are already in jail. But as long as you're proceeding in good faith, you're probably fine if your PPP loan is under $2 million. But if it's more than that, you probably need to expect an audit. Like how to fill out the application on the front end for these funds. Self-employed people, independent contractors, especially those without employees, this is still unknown on the front end of the funnel to get the loan on the front end. Forgiveness application, when is it due? Nobody knows. We know it can't be before July 1st because the program as written for forgiveness ends June 30th. So I know it's going to be July 1st or later, but past that, I don't know. And it may turn out to be dependent bank to bank. I literally have no idea. So then will they make these forgiveness forms less complicated? Ooh, they better. I am real smart and I do nothing but this for a living, and this is ridiculous. So I'm super hoping that turns out to be the case. And then here we go. This is one that we did tackle conversationally early on. Will Congress step in and change some of this? We've talked about different political goals, and especially with it being an election year, we'll just have to shake out and see what the powers that be come up with. But we're in hopes that that's the case, because this is doable. But the amount of funds that people are going to have to spend with attorneys and accountants to get this right is then another cash flow burden to especially small and young companies. And we're in hopes that burden can be lifted, because, you know, it is what it is. It's just also not awesome. So then I'm going to leave up, as we tackle more questions, that is our contact us page at our website, so that if you want to spend some time with us one-on-one, we can tackle whatever it is that you have going on. But I've seen the chat been flashing constantly. So Adam, let's address some questions in our little bit of remaining time.
So half of the flashing was me sending the articles.
Okay,
so
good.
I'll take credit for some of that. But I have 6 questions right now. So I have 3 forgiveness focused. So I'll ask these first. First one being, this person is wondering how to treat defined benefits retirement obligation that are not yet funded for 2019 and are occurring for 2020, and if these defined benefits program retirement expenses are eligible for PPP forgiveness.
In theory, yes. Based on when you fund, though, like if they're old commitments that haven't been funded yet, that's what makes me have a question mark. But generally, yes. But if they're old and you're just going to do them now, that's where I start to have a question. You're going to want to reach out to your CPA on that. Wanted to note here, and actually I am going to go back here and bear with me. Control. Let's scroll down. Payroll. Let's get in the second one. This is the second page of the application itself. Eligible non-payroll costs. So it includes interest payment on a mortgage. And here's that real or personal property. Here's, I don't know, rent obligations, business rent, lease payment, real or personal. I don't know, guys. I got to tell you the intention. I'm still leaning towards that being real estate only. But again, since the bank is interpreting this, include it if you're leasing a piece of equipment and make the bank chuck it out. You don't take it out, right? You're just like, here's all the things I think should be forgiven, and you make them read it and you make them pull the things out. You don't be like, oh, please, I have some more. That's the wrong approach. All right, so then, and utility payments. We talked before, they do now define what utility means. Here you can see it includes electricity, gas, water. Oh, see, here's the question from the other person, transportation. Well, what the hell does that mean? Like my car payment? See, these are some things that are going to get defined again, but I see the word in there, and whoever asked that question before, include every transportation thing you think should be included and make them take it out. then telephone and internet access are how those are being defined.
All right, well, thank you for that. Next forgiveness question. Can interest paid on business credit cards be forgiven?
Through this function, through this loan type, no. No. Through
Alrighty.
EIDL loan, if you have an SBA EIDL loan, yes. Through this, no.
All right, thank you. And then I hope no one can hear their mowing outside my window, you know, hazards of living at home or working at home. Can we claim the forgiven portion as income so we can deduct the salaries?
Okay, I confess that your phone broke up, or at least on my end, and I didn't hear the thing. So.
Okay, can you hear me now? Am I there?
Yeah.
It's like the old Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now?
Exactly.
So this person asked, can we claim the forgiven portion as income so we can deduct the salaries?
It's a bit of a wash, right? Because it's almost dollar for dollar the same. And the IRS has given guidance that you're not supposed to claim it. You can't have a deduction. Whether or not you want to be able to see if it benefits you to do it the other way is your call. Work with your CPA, but I don't know that that's a fight I'd want to pay a CPA to wage on my behalf. And you'll just have to run the numbers on your end.
Okay, and so being it's 2 o'clock, I'm not going to take any more questions in the chat. I'm going to try to ask these quick ones, Rebecca, if that's okay. That came in earlier.
Sure. Yeah, we didn't start until 1:03. We've got 3 minutes.
All right, 3 minutes. We got this. Do you need to rehire all furloughed part-time employees or just full-time employees?
The calculation is being done based on FTE. It is not being done on which humans and which amalgamation of humans, right? So it doesn't be like Bob used to work here, Bob still has to work here. And it doesn't have to be like I had 40 and 30 of them were full-time and would have 20 would have been part-time, and that makes 40 FTE. As long as 40 FTE in any configuration show up. So maybe you don't bring back 2 part-time people, but you bring back, you hire a new full-time person. See how those replace one another? This is being calculated on head count of FTE. And so.
All right. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Next question then. How generic or specific is the definition of utilities in PPP, as in a bar and restaurant? Would TV/audio be included?
The electricity that they consume, yes. And then I bought a TV? No. You're not allowed to buy assets with this money.
But you could use it for like cable subscription.
Cable, yes.
Yeah.
Satellite. Yeah, I'd call it, let's see, gas, water. When you write it up, you would say, instead of Time Warner and then saying cable, I'd make my submission say Time Warner Internet, based on the definition that we're looking on the screen here. Just because cable came with it, that's not how I'd phrase it. Because again, you're going to include it all and make the bank peel the pieces out that they don't want.
All right, last 2 here. If I pay my health insurance at the beginning of the month, but the loan is funded mid-month, do I get to claim a portion of the health insurance in the forgiveness calculations?
This is not supposed to be retroactive.
I think you're kind of breaking up there, Rebecca, right at the end.
Sure. This is not supposed to be retroactive. So what is supposed to happen is you would pick up a future month in it rather than going back for one. Right? So the 8-week span should pick up 2 months worth, no matter when it starts, right? So that's really about a when, not a what. Because the what, because you pay it regularly, you'll pick up 2.
All right, so we'll make this the last question. I'm putting the SBDC email back in the chat for if anyone has any other questions to reach out to you. Then the last question is, this person was wondering, do you know anything about the hazard pay in the HEROES Act?
I confess that until the HEROES Act has a chance in the Senate, I have a lot of things to do, and that's not been a good place for my energy. And so I have the roughest of idea. Now, from what I've heard of it, does Rebecca think it sounds great? Yes. Is Rebecca going to give it any more juice than that until I can take an action based on it? No. And so, unfortunately, I'm just not an expert on that one. I apologize.
All right, well, that's all I got for questions, so I think we can wrap up. Thank you so much for Rebecca for doing this. We appreciate it. I know this is our second time. We might have to do another 30 at this point. But we do appreciate your time with doing this and helping everyone out. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. I will send out later a recording of the event, all the hyperlinks. Remember, if you want to use the articles, you can get a library subscription, and that can get you through to the article. That was the most fascinating fact I learned today. Well, I'll send out the articles. I'll send out the contact information for the SBDC at UMKC, and I'll send out a recording to recap it all. There was a lot of information. If you need anything else, feel free to reach out. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
I need something, Adam.
Okay.
I'm gonna email you the link to how you would get your library card and where the Business Journal subscription is, and you just include it in your thing.
I will. Yep, I'll throw that in there. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great afternoon and enjoy the Memorial Day weekend.